My wife sat me down and said, "Honestly, you're draining. Give me a break. I need to remember what freedom feels like. Don't text, don't call." She walked out without looking back. The next day, her Instagram were full of expensive dinners, hotel room views, laughter behind the camera. When I messaged her, I didn't hold back. I wrote, "Are you really so pathetic you had to run back to your ex?" She replied, "Don't embarrass yourself. I told you I needed space. Go work on your jealousy." But I wasn't stupid. I knew her ex was already married and she was cheating on me with him. 2 weeks later, she was blowing up my phone, leaving voicemails, begging me for another chance. So here I am, Marcus Hale, 32 years old and apparently dumb enough to think my marriage was rock solid. Yeah, that's me. The guy who thought stable enough was actually a good thing to say about the person you're supposed to spend forever with. Real romantic, right? But honestly, that's where my head was at. Lauren and I had been together for 4 years, married for 2, and I genuinely believed we had our shit figured out. Spoiler alert, we absolutely did not. Looking back now, I can see the warning signs were practically neon billboards screaming, "Danger ahead, you moron." But apparently, I needed prescription glasses for relationship red flags. The cracks had been showing for months, spreading like spider webs across what I thought was our unbreakable foundation. But hey, I'm nothing if not optimistically oblivious. It started small, the way these things always do. Lauren used to be the kind of person who'd look up from whatever she was doing when I walked into a room. She'd smile, ask about my day, actually listen to my rambling stories about office drama or whatever stupid thing happened during my commute. But somewhere along the line, that stopped happening. Instead, she'd barely glance up from her phone, giving me these little responses that basically translated to "please shut up so I can get back to scrolling through whatever's more interesting than your existence." And man, was she always on that damn phone. I'm talking constantly, like surgically attached level of phone usage. She'd be scrolling through Instagram during dinner, texting during movies, even checking social media while we were supposed to be having conversations. I'd be mid-sentence telling her about something important. Well, important to me anyway. And she'd be double-tapping heart emojis on some influencer's breakfast photo. Real quality bonding time right there. The worst part? When I'd call her out on it, she'd get this look. You know the one. That mixture of annoyance and condescension that basically screams, "You're being dramatic and needy." She'd sigh, put the phone face down like she was making some huge sacrifice, and give me about 30 seconds of forced attention before her fingers started twitching toward the screen again. It was like watching someone try to quit smoking, except the addiction was other people's highlight reels. I tried everything to reconnect with her, and I mean everything. Simple stuff that shouldn't have been like pulling teeth from a particularly stubborn patient. "Hey, want to grab lunch at that place you used to love?" Nope, she was too tired. "How about we take a walk around the neighborhood? It's gorgeous outside." Still too tired. My parents have been asking when we're coming over for dinner again. And there it was, the classic Lauren brush-off. "Not now, Marcus. I'm tired, okay? Now, I'm not completely dense. People get tired. Life is exhausting. Work sucks. Adulting is basically a full-time job on top of your actual full-time job. I get it. But this wasn't regular tired. This was, I'm tired of you tired. This was, please stop trying to include me in our life together tired." And the kicker? She was never too tired to go out by herself. Oh, she had energy for that. Plenty of energy to get dressed up and disappear for hours at a time, usually on nights when I'd suggested we do something together. She'd come home with expensive takeout from places we used to go to together, reeking of wine and acting like nothing was weird about eating a $30 entree while I sat across from her with a bowl of Lucky Charms because I'd been waiting for her to get back so we could have dinner together like normal married people. "Where'd you go tonight?" I'd ask, trying to sound casual instead of pathetic. "Just out," she'd say, stabbing her gourmet salad with unnecessary force. "Needed some air." Some air. Right. Because apparently our house was some kind of toxic wasteland that could only be cured by expensive restaurants and mysterious solo adventures. My sister Rachel, bless her brutally honest heart, was the first person to say what I was too scared to think. We were having coffee one Sunday morning while Lauren was still sleeping off a headache from whatever the hell she'd been doing the night before. "Dude, she's pulling away on purpose," Rachel said, stirring sugar into her latte with the kind of aggressive precision she usually reserved for difficult conversations. Like, actively trying to create distance between you two. I almost choked on my coffee. Come on, Ratch. That's pretty harsh, don't you think? She gave me that look, the one she'd been perfecting since we were kids, the one that said I was being an idiot, and she was about to explain exactly why. Marcus, when's the last time she initiated any kind of conversation with you? When's the last time she suggested doing something together? When's the last time she acted like she actually wanted to be married to you? I opened my mouth to argue, then closed it again. Because honestly, I couldn't remember. When had Lauren last seemed genuinely happy to see me? When had she last suggested we spend time together instead of me begging for scraps of her attention like some desperate puppy? My best friend Julian, on the other hand, was team give her the benefit of the doubt. We were grabbing beers after work one Thursday, and I'd been venting about how disconnected everything felt at home. Look, man, Julian said, peeling the label off his beer bottle the way he always did when he was trying to be the voice of reason. Maybe she's just stressed out. Women deal with a lot of pressure we don't even think about. Social media, work, family expectations, all that stuff. Maybe she's just going through something and doesn't know how to talk about it. I wanted to believe him. God, did I want to believe him? Because the alternative, that my wife was actively trying to push me away, was too scary to face head-on. So I nodded and agreed and told myself that Julian was right, that this was just a rough patch, that Lauren would come around once whatever she was dealing with worked itself out. But deep down, in that part of your brain that knows the truth even when the rest of you is desperately trying to ignore it, I already knew something was seriously wrong. Call it intuition, call it pattern recognition, call it whatever you want. But there was this nagging feeling in my gut that wouldn't go away. The feeling that I was losing my wife, and she was letting it happen. Hell, maybe she was making it happen. The thing that really got me was how deliberate it all felt. This wasn't absent-mindedness or being distracted by work stress. This was calculated distance. This was someone systematically dismantling our connection, piece by piece, interaction by interaction. And the worst part? I was just sitting there letting it happen, making excuses for her behavior, and convincing myself that everything would go back to normal if I just tried a little harder, if I just gave her a little more space, if I just stopped being so needy and demanding. But here's the thing about gut feelings. They're usually right, even when you really, really wish they weren't. You know how some nights just have this weird energy to them? Like the universe is setting up dominoes, and you can feel them starting to tip, but you have no idea what the final picture's going to look like? That was Tuesday, March 15th, a date that's now permanently burned into my brain like a shitty tattoo I'll never be able to forget. The night my entire world got flipped upside down by 4 words that still make my stomach drop every time I think about them. It started normal enough, which is probably the most fucked up part about the whole thing. I got home from work around 6:30, same as always. Lauren was already there, sitting on our couch, our brown leather couch that we'd picked out together at that overpriced furniture store downtown, the one where she'd insisted we needed something mature and sophisticated for our first real place together. Funny how furniture can hold memories like that, how something as stupid as a couch can suddenly become evidence of a life you thought you were building with someone. She was just sitting there, perfectly still, staring at nothing in particular, not scrolling through her phone for once, which should have been my first clue that something was seriously off. Lauren without her phone was like seeing a fish out of water, technically possible, but definitely not natural. Her hands were folded in her lap, and she had this expression on her face that I'd never seen before. It was cold, sure, but it was more than that. It was resolved, like she'd already made some kind of decision and was just waiting for the right moment to share it with the class. "Hey, babe," I said, dropping my keys on the kitchen counter and loosening my tie. "How was your day?" She didn't answer right away, which again, should have set off every alarm bell in my head. Instead, she just looked at me with this weird intensity that made me feel like I was being studied under a microscope. Like she was cataloging everything about me that annoyed her, making some kind of mental list of my greatest hits of inadequacy. "Marcus," she said finally, and her voice had this flat, emotionless quality that made my name sound like a curse word. "We need to talk." Oh, fuck. Those 4 words. Is there any phrase in the English language that strikes more fear into the heart of anyone who's ever been in a relationship? We need to talk. is basically the relationship equivalent of the doctor will see you now, or the IRS would like to schedule an audit. Nothing good has ever followed those words in the history of human communication. I try to play it cool, though, because that's what guys do, right? We pretend everything's fine even when the Titanic is clearly sinking and the orchestra's already playing their farewell song. Sure, I said, walking over to sit next to her on the couch. What's up? But she held up a hand to stop me, like I was some kind of contaminated specimen that she couldn't risk getting too close to. Actually, don't sit down. This won't take long. Won't take long. Jesus Christ. She was talking about dismantling our entire relationship like it was some kind of quick errand she needed to run before the grocery store closed. Like she was about to tell me we were out of milk or that the cable bill was due. Not that she was about to detonate our entire life together. I stood there like an idiot, still holding my work bag, probably looking like a deer caught in headlights. Lauren took a deep breath, the kind of breath people take before they're about to say something that can't be taken back, something that's going to change everything forever. Honestly, you're draining, she said, and the words hit me like a physical blow to the chest. I need to remember what freedom feels like. Don't text. Don't call. And that was it. That was the entire conversation. 4 years together, 2 years of marriage, countless shared memories and inside jokes and plans for the future, and she summed it all up with those 2 sentences. I was draining. She needed freedom. Don't contact her. Case closed. Court dismissed. Thank you for playing. I stood there gaping like a fish, trying to process what had just happened. My brain was running through about a million different responses, from angry to confused to desperate to heartbroken, but somehow none of them made it to my mouth. I just stood there, probably looking like the world's biggest idiot, while my wife, calmly stood up from the couch like she'd just announced she was going to the store for groceries. Lauren, what the hell? I started, but she was already moving, already heading toward our bedroom with this purposeful stride that told me this wasn't some spur-of-the-moment decision. This was planned. This was calculated. This was something she'd been thinking about and preparing for while I'd been stumbling around in the dark, trying to figure out why she'd been so distant. She came back out less than 2 minutes later carrying a black duffel bag that I'd never seen before. A packed bag. A bag that she'd obviously prepared ahead of time, probably while I was at work, probably while I was sitting in my cubicle thinking about what we might have for dinner together or whether we should watch that new show everyone was talking about. This is insane, I said, finally finding my voice. You can't just leave like this. We're married, Lauren. We made vows. We signed papers. You can't just decide you want freedom and walk out the door. She stopped near the front door and looked at me, and for just a second, I thought I saw something flicker across her face. Regret, maybe? Second thoughts? But then it was gone, replaced by that same cold resolution that had been there when I walked in. Watch me, she said, and opened the door. No hug goodbye. No, I'm sorry it came to this. No, maybe we can work things out later. Not even a fucking take care of yourself. She just walked out of our apartment, out of our marriage, out of our life together, like I was some annoying roommate she'd finally gotten tired of living with. The door slammed behind her with this final, decisive sound that seemed to echo through the apartment for way longer than it should have. I stood there in the sudden silence, still holding my work bag, still wearing my tie, still trying to figure out what the hell had just happened. The apartment felt different immediately. Not just empty. Empty would have been understandable. This felt hollow, like someone had sucked all the life out of the place and left behind just the physical shell of what used to be our home. The couch looked different. The kitchen looked different. Even the stupid decorative pillows she'd insisted on buying looked different, like they were mocking me for ever thinking this was permanent. I sat down heavily on the couch, right where she'd been sitting just minutes before, and tried to wrap my head around what had just happened. My wife had just left me. My wife had just told me I was draining and walked out the door like our entire relationship meant nothing to her. My wife had just blown up our entire life together in less than 5 minutes. And the worst part? Deep down, I wasn't even surprised. I was devastated, sure. I was confused and angry and hurt, and about 17 other emotions I didn't have names for. But surprised? No, because that nagging feeling in my gut, the one I'd been trying to ignore for months, had been trying to tell me this was coming. I'd just been too scared, or too stupid, to listen. You'd think after having your heart ripped out and stomped on by someone you trusted with your entire future, you'd hit rock bottom, right? Like, surely there's nowhere to go but up from. My wife just called me draining and walked out with a pre-packed bag. Well, congratulations to me for being spectacularly wrong about that, because apparently Lauren wasn't done twisting the knife. She was just getting started. I barely slept that night. How could I? I kept replaying those 4 words over and over in my head like some kind of torture device my brain had decided to install. Honestly, you're draining. I must have picked up my phone a dozen times to text her, to call her, to do something, anything, to try and make sense of what had just happened. But each time, I heard her voice saying, "Don't text, don't call," and I'd put the phone back down like the pathetic, obedient little puppy I apparently was. By morning, I felt like I'd been hit by a truck, then backed over by the same truck just to make sure the job was done properly. I called in sick to work because there was no way I could sit in meetings and pretend to care about quarterly reports when my entire life had just imploded. Instead, I spent the morning wandering around our apartment, my apartment now, I guess, trying to figure out what the hell I was supposed to do next. That's when I made the mistake that would haunt me for the rest of the day. I opened Instagram. Look, I know what you're thinking. Marcus, you absolute moron. Why would you torture yourself by checking your estranged wife's social media? And you'd be 100% right to think that. It was stupid. It was masochistic. It was like poking a fresh wound with a rusty fork just to see if it still hurt. But grief makes you do incredibly dumb things, and apparently I was about to earn my PhD in incredibly dumb things. At first, there was nothing new on Lauren's profile. Her last post was from 3 days ago, some basic yoga pose with a caption about finding inner peace that now seemed like the most ironic bullshit in the world. But then I noticed the little circle around her profile picture. A story. A fresh story that had been posted just 2 hours ago. My finger hesitated over the screen. I knew I shouldn't look. I knew whatever I was about to see was going to hurt like hell. But curiosity and masochism are a hell of a drug combination. So I tapped that little circle and watched my world collapse all over again. The first story was a picture of champagne glasses clinking together, all golden and bubbly and celebratory. The kind of shot that screams, "I'm living my best life and having the time of my fucking life doing it." No caption, just the champagne and some upbeat song playing over it that made me want to throw my phone across the room. The second story was worse. Much worse. It was a view from what was obviously a hotel room. One of those floor-to-ceiling windows that show off a city skyline, the kind of view that costs serious money. You could see the reflection in the glass, and there were 2 wine glasses on the table, 2 plates with what looked like room service, 2 of everything. Like she was celebrating her newfound freedom with a romantic dinner for 2. But the third story? The third story was the one that made me actually say, "What the fuck?" out loud to my empty apartment. It was a video, just a few seconds long, but long enough to hear something that made my blood run cold. Laughter. Not just any laughter. I knew that laugh. I'd heard it before, back when Lauren and I first started dating, and she'd tell me stories about her past relationships. It was deep, masculine, with this specific rhythm that I remembered because it used to make me jealous even in stories. It was Damien's laugh. Damien fucking Rodriguez. Her ex from 3 years ago. The one who'd never really gone away, not completely. The one who always seemed to linger around the edges of our relationship like some kind of relationship herpes, dormant most of the time, but never fully gone and always ready to flare up at the worst possible moment. I sat there staring at my phone screen, watching that stupid story loop over and over again, and suddenly everything clicked into place with horrible, crystal clear clarity. The distance, the late nights out, the expensive takeout, the "I need freedom" speech. None of it was about me being draining or her needing space or any of that psychological bullshit. It was about him. It was about Damien, the married asshole who'd been sniffing around my wife like a dog in heat. The rage that hit me was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. It started in my chest, this burning sensation that spread outward until my hands were shaking and I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. She hadn't even waited 24 hours. 24 fucking hours. And she was already posting romantic hotel room views and champagne celebrations with her ex-boyfriend like our marriage had been nothing more than an inconvenient obstacle she'd finally managed to remove. Before I could stop myself, before the rational part of my brain could tell me this was a terrible idea, I was typing. My fingers moved across the screen like they had a mind of their own, composing a message that I would probably regret but desperately needed to send. Are you really so pathetic you had to run back to your ex? I hit send before I could chicken out, then immediately wanted to throw my phone into the nearest wall. Because now I looked like the crazy, jealous ex-husband who couldn't handle his wife moving on. Now I looked like exactly the kind of guy who would stalk his ex's Instagram stories and send angry messages. But you know what? I was beyond caring about how I looked. I was hurt, I was furious, and I wanted her to know that I wasn't some clueless idiot who didn't understand what was happening here. The message showed as delivered immediately, then switched to read about 30 seconds later. Then nothing. Radio silence. She'd seen it, she'd read it, and she was choosing not to respond, which somehow made everything worse. At least if she'd fired back with some angry response, I'd know I'd gotten under her skin. The silence just felt like dismissal, like she couldn't even be bothered to defend herself because my opinion didn't matter to her anymore. Hours passed. I paced around the apartment like a caged animal, checking my phone every 5 minutes to see if she'd responded. I knew I was being pathetic, but I couldn't help myself. I needed some kind of reaction, some acknowledgement that what she was doing was fucked up and hurtful and completely insane. Finally, around 7 o'clock that evening, my phone buzzed. A message from Lauren. My heart jumped into my throat as I opened it, but what I read made me feel like I'd been punched in the gut all over again. Don't embarrass yourself. I told you I needed space. Go work on your jealousy. That was it. That was her entire response to being called out for running straight from our marriage bed into a hotel room with her ex. She was trying to gaslight me, trying to make me think I was the problem, that I was being unreasonable and jealous and embarrassing. Like I was some kind of paranoid lunatic for putting 2 and 2 together and coming up with my wife is cheating on me with her married ex-boyfriend. But I wasn't stupid. I wasn't paranoid. And I sure as hell wasn't going to let her rewrite history to make herself the victim in this story. I knew exactly what she was doing, and more importantly, I knew exactly who she was doing it with. The only question now was what I was going to do about it. You know what's worse than suspecting your wife is cheating on you with her married ex-boyfriend? Having that suspicion confirmed by a steady stream of evidence that makes you feel like the biggest fool who ever walked the earth. Because apparently, while I was sitting in my apartment eating cereal for dinner and wondering if I was losing my mind, Lauren and Damien were putting on a show for the entire world to see. And by the entire world, I mean everyone except his wife and me. The 2 people who actually deserved to know what was happening. The whispers started the very next day, and let me tell you, there's nothing quite like having your personal humiliation become the topic of casual conversation among your friends and family. It's like being the star of a reality show you never signed up for, except instead of winning money, you win the privilege of having everyone you know discuss your failed marriage over their morning coffee. Rachel was the first one to reach out, because of course she was. My sister has always had this supernatural ability to sniff out drama from 3 states away, and apparently Lauren's Instagram stories had made their way through the gossip pipeline faster than wildfire in a drought. My phone buzzed around 10 in the morning with a text that made my stomach drop. You need to see this. Screenshots incoming. And Jesus Christ, were there screenshots? Rachel had apparently done a full forensic analysis of Lauren's social media presence over the past 48 hours, complete with timestamps and commentary that would make a private investigator proud. There were pictures from high-end restaurants that I definitely couldn't afford on my salary. There were wine glasses and cocktail shots and artsy food photos that screamed, someone else is paying for this expensive bullshit. But the real kicker was the details. The little things that most people wouldn't notice, but that felt like daggers when you knew what to look for. In one photo, you could see the edge of a man's watch in the corner of the frame. Not just any watch, but a Rolex Submariner that I recognized because Damien used to post pictures of it constantly back when Lauren and I first started dating, and I was stupid enough to follow him on Instagram. The same watch that probably cost more than my car, and that he wore like some kind of status symbol to remind everyone how much money he made selling overpriced medical equipment to hospitals. Another photo showed Lauren's hand reaching for a wine glass, and you could see another hand in the background, masculine, with a wedding ring that definitely wasn't mine. Because mine was sitting in a drawer at home after I'd ripped it off my finger in a fit of rage the night before, while his was apparently just fine staying right where it belonged while he wine and dined my wife in expensive restaurants. This is fucked up, Marcus, Rachel texted along with the screenshots. Like, seriously fucked up. She's not even trying to hide it. And she was right. Lauren wasn't trying to hide anything. If anything, she was flaunting it, posting these photos like she was some kind of newly single woman celebrating her freedom instead of a married woman who'd walked out on her husband less than 48 hours earlier. It was like she'd completely erased our entire relationship from her memory and decided to rewrite history so that she was the protagonist of some romantic comedy where the plucky heroine escapes her boring marriage to rekindle an old flame. But Rachel's screenshots were just the beginning. Around noon, my phone rang with a call from Noah, my best friend since college, and the kind of guy who usually minds his own business unless something is seriously wrong. Dude, he said without even saying hello, we need to talk. Yeah, I know, I said, sinking into my couch and preparing myself for whatever fresh hell he was about to deliver. Rachel already sent me the Instagram evidence. It's pretty fucking obvious what's going on. No, man, it's worse than Instagram, Noah said, and I could hear him pacing around his apartment the way he always did when he was agitated. I saw them. Saw them. Last night at Meridian. Meridian, the most expensive restaurant in downtown, the kind of place where you need a reservation 3 weeks in advance and a credit card that doesn't get declined when they run a $400 dinner tab. The kind of place Lauren had always wanted to go for our anniversary, but that we could never afford because we were supposedly saving money for a house down payment. The kind of place that I now realized she'd probably been to plenty of times, just not with me. Tell me everything, I said, because apparently I'm a glutton for punishment and needed to hear every excruciating detail of my wife's betrayal. I was there with Sarah for her birthday dinner, Noah continued, referring to his girlfriend of 6 months. We're sitting at our table, and I look over toward the bar area, and there she is. Lauren, looking like she's on the best date of her fucking life. My grip tightened on the phone. And Damien? Oh, he was there all right. Couldn't miss him with that stupid slick-back hair and the designer suit that probably cost more than my rent. They were sitting in one of those corner booths, the kind where you sit on the same side, so you can get all cozy and romantic. And Marcus, I gotta tell you, they weren't acting like old friends catching up over dinner. What do you mean? I mean, she had her hand on his fucking leg under the table. I mean, he was feeding her bites of his steak like they were some kind of romantic movie scene. I mean, they were laughing and touching and acting like two people who were definitely planning to end the evening in the same bed. The mental image hit me like a freight train. Lauren, my wife, the woman who'd told me just 2 days earlier that I was draining and that she needed freedom, was playing footsie with her married ex-boyfriend in a restaurant that cost more than most people's rent. While I was at home eating leftover pizza and trying to figure out what I'd done wrong, she was living it up like some kind of kept woman whose sugar daddy was footing the bill for her post-marriage celebration. There's more, Noah said, and somehow I knew it was going to get worse. When they left, he had his hand on the small of her back. You know, that possessive way guys do when they're with someone they're sleeping with. And get this, they got into the same car. His car. The black Mercedes that he's always posting pictures of on social media. Did Sarah see them too? I asked, because part of me was still hoping this was some kind of misunderstanding, some cosmic coincidence that could be explained away. Yeah, she saw them. She was the one who pointed them out to me. Said Lauren looked different, like happier than she'd ever seen her. Which, you know, really fucking stings when you think about it. Happier than she'd ever been. Happier than she'd been in 4 years with me. Happier than she'd been on our wedding day, or our honeymoon, or any of the thousands of moments I'd thought we were building a life together. She was happier in 2 days with her married ex-boyfriend than she'd been in 2 years as my wife. But Noah still wasn't finished destroying what was left of my sanity. And Marcus, there's something else you need to know. About Elena. Elena, Damien's wife. The woman whose husband was currently wining and dining my wife in expensive restaurants while she was probably at home thinking her marriage was solid. The woman who had no idea that her husband was cheating on her with someone who was supposed to be off limits. What about her? I asked, though I had a feeling I already knew where this was going. She's been posting pictures from some beach vacation. Looks like she's in Florida or somewhere tropical, posting all these happy couple photos with hashtags about perfect getaway with my hubby, and so grateful for this amazing man. Except her hubby isn't with her. It's just her and some girlfriends. The photos are old, Marcus. She's posting old photos and pretending like everything's perfect while her husband is cheating on her. And there it was, the final piece of the puzzle that made everything crystal clear. Elena was completely clueless about what her husband was doing. She was posting throwback photos and romantic captions about a man who was currently betraying her with my wife. She had no idea that while she was probably missing him and wishing he could have come on vacation with her, he was busy recreating their romantic dinners with someone else. Lauren wasn't just destroying our marriage. She was helping Damien destroy his too. And somehow, that made everything so much worse. Because it meant this wasn't just about her wanting freedom or needing space or any of the other bullshit excuses she'd given me. This was calculated. This was deliberate. This was two people who knew exactly what they were doing and didn't give a single fuck about the collateral damage they were causing. I felt sick. Actually, physically sick, like someone had punched me in the stomach and then made me ride a roller coaster. Because now I knew for sure that everything I'd suspected was true, and it was so much worse than I'd imagined. There's this moment in every person's life when they have to decide whether they're going to roll over and play dead or stand up and fight back. For me, that moment came at 3:30 in the morning, for days after my wife walked out, when I was lying in bed staring at the ceiling and replaying Noah's words over and over again. She looked happier than she'd ever been. That's when something inside me finally snapped, and I realized I wasn't going to let Lauren rewrite our entire relationship to make herself feel better about being a cheating, lying piece of shit. I couldn't take the silence anymore. Not the silence from her, not the silence from me, and definitely not the deafening quiet of my apartment that used to feel like home, but now felt like a mausoleum for my dead marriage. I needed answers. I needed confrontation. I needed something other than this passive acceptance of being discarded like last week's garbage while she lived it up with her married boyfriend. So I did what any rational, completely unhinged person would do at 3:30 in the morning. I grabbed my phone and started typing. I know you're with Damien. I know you've been planning this. I know you're both pathetic pieces of shit who deserve each other. But what I don't know is how you can sleep at night knowing you're destroying two marriages for some middle-aged fantasy that's going to blow up in both your faces. I stared at that message for about 10 minutes, my thumb hovering over the send button while my brain went through every possible scenario of what might happen next. She could block me. She could screenshot it and send it to everyone we knew to make me look like the crazy ex-husband. She could use it as evidence that I was unstable and needed to be avoided at all costs. But you know what? I was beyond caring about any of that shit. I was tired of being the reasonable one. I was tired of taking the high road while she was down in the gutter rolling around with her ex-boyfriend. I was tired of protecting her reputation while she was actively destroying mine by making me look like the fool who didn't see it coming. I hit send. The message went from delivered to read in less than 30 seconds, which meant she was awake at 3:30 in the morning, probably lying in some hotel bed next to Damien, scrolling through her phone instead of sleeping like a normal person. The thought of her reading my message while he was right there next to her made me feel sick, but it also made me feel something else, vindicated. She knew I wasn't stupid. She knew I'd figured out exactly what she was doing. But then came the waiting. Hours and hours of soul-crushing, anxiety-inducing waiting while my phone sat silent on my nightstand like some kind of digital torture device. I kept checking it every few minutes, willing it to buzz with a response, with some kind of acknowledgement that my message had hit its mark. But there was nothing. Radio silence. The kind of deliberate, calculated silence that's somehow more insulting than any insult could ever be. I made it until about noon before I cracked and sent another message. This one was shorter, but somehow felt more desperate. The least you can do is respond. I deserve that much. Still nothing. She was giving me the silent treatment like we were in middle school, and I'd said something mean about her best friend. Except we weren't kids anymore, and this wasn't some playground drama that would blow over by next week. This was my marriage, my life, my future that she'd decided to torch without even having the basic human decency to explain why. By evening, I was practically climbing the walls. I'd called in sick to work again because there was no way I could sit through meetings and pretend to care about profit margins when my entire world was falling apart. Instead, I spent the day pacing around the apartment, checking my phone obsessively, and slowly losing what was left of my sanity. That's when my phone finally buzzed. For a split second, my heart jumped because I thought it was Lauren finally responding. But no, It was just a text from some random number that turned out to be a spam message about car insurance. The disappointment was so crushing that I actually laughed out loud, which probably would have worried me if I'd been thinking clearly enough to worry about my own mental state. But then, around 7 o'clock, just when I was starting to convince myself that she was never going to respond, my phone lit up with a message from Lauren. My hands were literally shaking as I opened it, and what I read made me want to throw my phone across the room. "Stop making yourself look crazy." That was it. That was her entire response to being called out for cheating on me with her married ex-boyfriend. 6 words that somehow managed to be more insulting than if she'd written me a 10-page essay about everything she hated about me. She wasn't denying anything. She wasn't explaining anything. She wasn't even pretending to feel guilty about anything. She was just telling me to stop making myself look crazy, like I was the problem, like I was the one doing something wrong. It was gaslighting at its finest, and it was so perfectly Lauren that I almost had to admire the artistry of it. She'd managed to take a situation where she was clearly the villain and twist it around to make me the bad guy. I was the one making myself look crazy by pointing out that my wife was cheating on me. I was the one being unreasonable by expecting some kind of explanation or apology or basic human decency. That message broke something fundamental inside me, not my heart, that had already been shattered into a million pieces. It broke my willingness to play by her rules, to be the good guy, to take whatever shit she wanted to throw at me, and just smile and nod and ask for more. I called Rachel immediately, and she picked up on the first ring like she'd been waiting for my call. She fucking responded. I said without even saying hello. What did she say? She told me to stop making myself look crazy. Can you believe that shit? I call her out for cheating, and she tells me I'm making myself look crazy. There was a pause, and then Rachel said something that I'll never forget. "Marcus, she's trying to make you doubt your own reality. Don't let her do that to you. You know what you saw. You know what's happening. Don't let her make you think you're the problem." And she was right. That's exactly what Lauren was doing. She was trying to gaslight me into thinking I was being paranoid and unreasonable, that I was jumping to conclusions and creating drama where none existed. She was trying to rewrite the narrative so that I became the crazy ex-husband who couldn't handle his wife moving on, instead of the betrayed spouse who'd caught her cheating with her married ex-boyfriend. But I wasn't going to let her do that to me. Not anymore. Noah called me about an hour later, and his advice was more direct. "Dude, cut your losses. She's shown you who she really is. Believe her and move on." My mother, when I finally worked up the courage to call her and give her the abbreviated version of what was happening, was characteristically blunt. "Don't let her make you small, Marcus. You're worth more than that. Don't let her make you small." Those words hit me like a lightning bolt, because that's exactly what Lauren was trying to do. She was trying to make me small, trying to make me doubt myself, trying to make me believe that I was the problem and that she was justified in everything she was doing. But I wasn't small. I wasn't crazy. And I wasn't going to let her rewrite history to make herself the victim in a story where she was clearly the villain. That's when I started gathering everything. Screenshots of her Instagram stories, text message conversations, timelines of when she'd claimed to be tired versus when she'd been posting pictures from expensive restaurants. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with all of it, but I knew I wasn't going to let her get away with pretending that none of this had happened. Because the truth matters, even when it's ugly. Especially when it's ugly. 2 weeks. That's how long it took for Lauren and Damien's little fantasy bubble to burst like a cheap balloon at a kid's birthday party. 2 weeks of expensive dinners and hotel rooms and champagne toasts to their newfound freedom before reality came crashing down on them like a fucking avalanche. And let me tell you, watching their perfect little affair implode was better than any revenge I could have planned myself. It started with the digital silence. One day Lauren's Instagram was full of cryptic posts about living authentically and following your heart and other inspirational bullshit that probably came straight from some basic bitch Pinterest board. The next day, radio silence. Complete social media blackout. Her stories disappeared, her posts vanished, and her profile went private faster than you could say home-wrecking adulteress. Damien's Instagram followed suit within hours, like they'd coordinated their digital disappearing act over mimosas at whatever overpriced brunch spot they'd been frequenting. Rachel was the first one to notice, because of course she was. My sister had been monitoring Lauren's social media activity with the dedication of a CIA operative tracking international terrorists. When Lauren's profile suddenly went dark, Rachel called me immediately with the kind of excitement usually reserved for major sporting events or celebrity scandals. Dude, something big happened, she said without even bothering with hello. Lauren's Instagram is completely fucking gone. Like, not just no new posts, but everything is private and locked down tight. Maybe she finally realized how pathetic she looked posting about her affair for the whole world to see, I said, though even as the words came out of my mouth, I knew it was more than that. Lauren loved social media attention more than most people love oxygen. The only thing that would make her go dark voluntarily was if something had forced her underground. But the real confirmation came from an unexpected source, Elena herself. Not directly, mind you. I'd never spoken to Damien's wife in my life, and I wasn't about to start sliding into her DMs to compare notes about our cheating spouses. But Elena had her own social media presence, and unlike Lauren, she wasn't trying to hide from the world. Her posts from that Thursday told a story that didn't require a detective to piece together. Gone were the fake throwback photos and the missing my hubby captions. Instead, there were posts about new beginnings and discovering your own strength, and the real kicker, a photo of her wedding ring sitting on a table next to a cup of coffee with the caption, "Some chapters have to end for new ones to begin." Holy shit. Elena knew. Somehow, someway, Damien's wife had found out about his little side adventure with my wife, and she'd clearly decided she wasn't going to play the role of the oblivious spouse anymore. The timeline made perfect sense too. Elena's revelation posts started appearing right around the time Lauren and Damien's social media accounts went into witness protection mode. I never found out exactly how Elena discovered the affair, and honestly, I didn't really care. Maybe she got suspicious about Damien's sudden work trips and expensive dinners. Maybe someone else spotted them and told her. Maybe she did her own Instagram detective work and put the pieces together. However it happened, the result was the same. Their little fantasy was over, and reality was about to hit them both like a freight train carrying a cargo load of consequences. My phone started buzzing around noon that day, and when I saw Lauren's name on the screen, I almost didn't answer. After 2 weeks of radio silence and gaslighting, she had some serious fucking nerve calling me like we were old friends catching up. But curiosity got the better of me, and I picked up on the fourth ring. "Marcus, please," she started, but I cut her off immediately. "Oh, so now you want to talk? After 2 weeks of playing house with your married boyfriend, now you want to have a conversation?" There was silence on the other end, and for a second I thought she'd hung up. But then I heard something that I'd never heard from Lauren before in all our years together. Genuine panic. "Marcus, please, I need you to know that I never meant for any of this to happen. It got out of hand, and now everything's falling apart, and I don't know what to do." "What to do about what, Lauren? About the fact that you cheated on me? About the fact that you helped destroy another marriage? About the fact that you're a lying, manipulative piece of shit who threw away 4 years for some middle-aged fantasy?" "Don't," she said, and her voice cracked in a way that would have made me feel bad for her if I hadn't spent the last 2 weeks eating cereal for dinner while she lived it up in 5-star hotels. "Don't say things like that. You don't understand what it's been like." "What it's been like? What it's been like for who? For you? You think I give a single fuck what it's been like for you? Do you have any idea what the last 2 weeks have been like for me? Do you have any concept of how humiliating it's been to have everyone I know see you flaunting your affair on social media?" She was crying now, which should have made me feel victorious, but somehow just made me feel empty. "I never wanted to hurt you," she said through her tears. "I never wanted any of this to happen. But you did want it to happen," I said, and my voice was steady in a way that surprised me. "You packed a bag before you even told me you were leaving. You had this whole thing planned out. You knew exactly what you were doing." The crying got harder, and then she said something that made my blood boil. "How could you do this to me? How could I do this to her?" Lauren had just asked me how I could do this to her, like I was the one who'd cheated, like I was the one who'd destroyed 2 marriages, like I was the one who'd caused this entire clusterfuck of pain and betrayal. "How could I do what to you, Lauren? How could I do what?" "You know what you did," she said, and there was anger creeping into her voice now, mixing with the tears to create this toxic cocktail of self-righteous victimhood. "You turned everyone against me. You made sure his wife found out. You ruined everything." And there it was, the accusation I'd been waiting for. Somehow, in Lauren's twisted logic, I was responsible for Elena discovering her husband's affair. I was the villain in this story because I hadn't been content to sit quietly while my wife fucked her ex-boyfriend in expensive hotel rooms and posted about it on Instagram. I didn't tell Elena shit, I said, and it was the truth. I never contacted her, never reached out to her, never said a single word to her about what you and Damien were doing. If she found out, it's because you two were too fucking stupid to keep your affair quiet. You're lying, she said, but there was uncertainty in her voice now, like she was starting to realize that maybe, just maybe, her perfect little secret romance hadn't been as secret as she thought. I'm not lying, Lauren. But you know what? I'm glad she found out. I'm glad your little fantasy exploded in your face. I'm glad you're finally facing some consequences for what you did. The line went quiet for a long moment, and then Lauren said something that made me realize just how delusional she'd become. I thought you loved me. I did love you, I said, and for the first time since this whole nightmare began, I felt something like peace. But the person I loved wouldn't have done what you did. The person I loved wouldn't have cheated on me and then try to make me think I was crazy for noticing. The person I loved is gone, and I'm not sure she ever really existed in the first place. She hung up without saying goodbye, and I sat there staring at my phone, waiting to feel something other than the strange calm that had settled over me. For the first time in 2 weeks, I wasn't angry. I wasn't hurt. I wasn't even particularly sad. I was just done. If you've never experienced the unique joy of having someone who crushed your soul suddenly decide they want you back, let me paint you a picture. It's like being mauled by a bear, surviving the attack, and then having that same bear show up at your hospital room with a box of chocolates and an apology card. Except the bear is your cheating ex-wife. The chocolates are a bunch of bullshit excuses, and the apology card is written in crayon because apparently adultery makes you forget how to function like a normal human being. That phone call with Lauren was supposed to be the end of it. In my head, I'd imagined that conversation would provide some kind of closure, that we'd both say our piece and then fade into separate corners of the universe to lick our wounds and pretend the other person had never existed. What I didn't anticipate was that Lauren would interpret my calm, measured response as some kind of invitation to launch a full-scale campaign to win me back. The voicemail started that same night. The first one came in around 11 p.m., and when I saw her name on my caller ID, I almost answered out of pure shock. But then I remembered her voice asking, "How could you do this to me?" Like I was the one who'd burned our marriage to the ground, and I let it go to voicemail instead. "Marcus, it's me." The message began, and her voice sounded different somehow. Smaller, more fragile, like she'd been crying for hours and had finally worn herself out to the point where she could barely speak above a whisper. "I know you probably don't want to hear from me right now, but I needed to tell you something. I've been thinking about what you said, about the person you loved being gone, and I think maybe you're right. I think I lost myself somewhere along the way, and I don't know how it happened." She paused, and I could hear her breathing on the other end, shaky and uneven like she was trying not to start crying again. "I miss you," she continued, and those 3 words hit me like a punch to the gut. I miss us. I miss what we had before everything got so complicated. I know I fucked up, Marcus. I know I hurt you in ways that probably can't be fixed, but I want to try. I want to figure out how to be the person you fell in love with again. The voicemail ended there, and I sat on my couch staring at my phone like it was some kind of alien artifact that had just materialized in my living room. Miss me? Miss us? Where the hell had this sudden burst of nostalgia been 2 weeks ago when she was posting champagne photos with her married ex-boyfriend? But Lauren was just getting started. The second voicemail came the next morning while I was getting ready for work, my first day back in the office since the whole shitstorm began. I'd finally decided that wallowing in my apartment wasn't doing anyone any good, and I needed to at least pretend to be a functional adult member of society. "Marcus, I know you're probably screening my calls, and I don't blame you." This message began. "But I need you to know that it's over with Damien. Completely over. It was a mistake, a huge fucking mistake, and I can see that now. His wife found out, obviously, and she's filing for divorce, and he's blaming me for everything like it's somehow all my fault." There was a bitter laugh in her voice that I'd never heard before, like she was finally starting to understand that actions have consequences and that those consequences don't always care about your feelings. "He said I seduced him," she continued, and now there was anger creeping in. "Can you believe that shit?" Like I held a gun to his head, and forced him to cheat on his wife. Like I'm some kind of home-wrecking temptress who destroys marriages for fun. He's such a fucking coward, Marcus. He won't take responsibility for anything. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Lauren was complaining about Damien not taking responsibility for his actions, while simultaneously trying to frame their affair as some kind of temporary insanity that she wasn't really accountable for. The complete lack of self-awareness was almost impressive in its scope. But she wasn't done. I realize now that what we had was real, Marcus. What I had with you was real in a way that what I had with Damien never was. He was just, I don't know, some kind of midlife crisis bullshit. But you and me, we built something together. We had a life together. And I threw it all away for what? For some fantasy that lasted 2 weeks before it blew up in my face. The third voicemail came that evening, and by this point, I was starting to recognize a pattern. Lauren was cycling through the 5 stages of grief, except instead of dealing with a death, she was dealing with the consequences of her own choices. And apparently, she'd decided that I was going to be her therapist, her priest, and her emotional support system all rolled into one. I can't stop thinking about our first apartment, she said in this dreamy, nostalgic voice that made my skin crawl. Do you remember that tiny place on Maple Street with the broken air conditioner and the neighbors who played music too loud? We were so happy there, Marcus. We didn't have any money, and the place was basically falling apart, but we were happy. We used to talk about our future like it was this amazing thing we were building together. She was right, of course. I did remember that apartment, and I remembered being happy there. But what Lauren seemed to have forgotten was that the reason we'd been happy was because we'd been honest with each other. We'd been faithful to each other. We'd been building something together instead of one person secretly planning to tear it all down. I want that back, she continued. I want us back. I know it sounds crazy after everything that's happened, but I think we can fix this. I think we can be even stronger than we were before if we can just find a way to work through this. The fourth voicemail was where things started to get really desperate. Her voice was slurred slightly, like she'd been drinking, and there was a manic edge to her words that made me genuinely concerned for her mental state. I know you think I'm a terrible person, she said, and maybe I am. Maybe I'm the worst person in the world for what I did to you. But Marcus, you have to understand, I was drowning. I felt like I was disappearing, like I was losing myself in our relationship, and I didn't know how to tell you that without hurting you. This was new territory. Up until now, Lauren had been focused on apologizing and trying to convince me that her affair was a mistake. But now she was starting to blame our relationship itself, suggesting that somehow I'd been responsible for making her feel like she needed to cheat. I should have talked to you, she continued. I should have told you how I was feeling instead of running away. But I was scared, Marcus. I was scared that if I told you I was unhappy, you'd leave me. So instead, I sabotaged everything. And now I've lost you anyway, and I don't know how to live with that. The fifth voicemail came at 2 a.m, and when I listened to it the next day, I could tell she'd been crying for hours. Her voice was raw and broken, and she kept stopping mid-sentence like she was struggling to get the words out. I know you probably hate me, she whispered, and I know you have every right to hate me. But I need you to know that I love you. I've always loved you, even when I was with him, even when I was doing the most horrible things a person can do to someone they love. I know that doesn't make sense, and I know it doesn't make anything better, but it's the truth. She was sobbing openly now, and the sound was so raw and desperate that I had to put the phone down and walk away from it. Please don't give up on me, she begged through her tears. Please don't give up on us. I know I don't deserve another chance, but I'm asking for one anyway. I'm begging for one, because I can't imagine my life without you in it, and I don't want to have to try. By the end of the week, I had 17 voicemails from Lauren. 17 messages that ranged from apologetic to desperate to angry to heartbroken and back again. She was cycling through every emotion in the human experience, trying to find the magic combination of words that would somehow undo everything that had happened and bring us back to some imaginary version of our relationship where none of this had occurred. Rachel called me on Friday evening after I'd told her about the voicemail bombardment. Dude, you need to block her number, she said without any preamble. This is getting unhealthy. For both of you. I know, I said, and I did know. But there was something almost hypnotic about Lauren's desperation, something that made me want to keep listening even though every message felt like reopening a wound that was trying to heal. She's not sorry because she loves you. Rachel continued, and her voice had that sharp edge it got when she was trying to protect me from my own stupidity. She's sorry because her fantasy blew up, and now she's alone. If Damien had left his wife and run away with her to some tropical paradise, do you think you'd be getting these calls? Noah echoed the same sentiment when I talked to him the next day. She's only coming back because she doesn't have anywhere else to go, he said. Think about it, Marcus. When everything was going great with her affair, when she was posting those Instagram stories and living it up in fancy hotels, did she call you once to apologize? Did she reach out even one time to see how you were doing? They were both right, and deep down, I knew they were right. Lauren wasn't having some grand revelation about how much she loved me and missed our life together. She was having a panic attack about being alone, about losing both her husband and her boyfriend in the span of 2 weeks, about facing the consequences of her choices without anyone to cushion the blow. But knowing something intellectually and feeling it emotionally are two completely different things. And emotionally, I was still that guy who'd loved Lauren for 4 years, who'd married her believing we'd grow old together, who'd built an entire vision of the future with her at the center of it. So I kept listening to the voicemails. I kept letting her pour her heart out into my inbox. And I kept pretending that maybe, just maybe, there was something in those desperate messages that could somehow make sense of the senseless destruction of everything I'd thought my life was going to be. There's something deeply unsettling about opening your front door and finding the person who destroyed your life standing in your hallway looking like they've been hit by a truck. It's like opening your refrigerator and discovering that all your food has been replaced with live snakes. Technically possible, but so far outside the realm of normal human experience that your brain just sort of short-circuits trying to process what you're seeing. That's exactly what happened to me on a rainy Thursday evening in late March when I heard 3 soft knocks on my apartment door and opened it to find Lauren standing there looking like she'd been put through an industrial blender set to emotional devastation. And let me tell you, the woman standing in my hallway bore almost no resemblance to the confident, glowing person who'd been posting champagne selfies just a few weeks earlier. Her hair, which she'd always been obsessive about maintaining in perfect condition, looked like she'd been running her fingers through it for hours. Her makeup, what was left of it, had clearly been applied at some point earlier in the day and then destroyed by tears and rain, and whatever emotional breakdown had driven her to show up at my door unannounced. She was wearing jeans and a hoodie, which might not sound like a big deal to most people, but Lauren never wore hoodies. Ever. She thought they were slovenly and unprofessional, which should tell you everything you need to know about her current mental state. But it was her eyes that really got to me. They were red-rimmed and swollen from crying, sure, but more than that, they had this haunted quality that I'd never seen before. Like she'd been staring at something terrible for so long that the image had gotten burned into her retinas. Like she'd finally seen herself clearly for the first time and didn't like what she'd discovered. "Marcus," she said, and her voice was barely above a whisper. "Please, I know I don't have any right to be here, but I need to talk to you. Just 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking for." I stood there in my doorway, probably looking like an idiot, trying to reconcile the broken woman in front of me with the cold, calculating person who'd packed a bag in secret and walked out of my life without so much as a backward glance. This wasn't the Lauren who'd told me I was draining and that she needed to remember what freedom felt like. This wasn't the Lauren who'd posted Instagram stories from expensive hotel rooms while I ate cereal for dinner and wondered what I'd done wrong. This was someone else entirely, and I wasn't sure how I felt about that. 5 minutes, she repeated when I didn't immediately respond. "Please, Marcus, I'm begging you." And there was something about the word begging that finally snapped me out of my stupor. Lauren didn't beg. Lauren demanded. Lauren manipulated. Lauren calculated her way into getting what she wanted, but she didn't beg. The fact that she was standing in my hallway using that word told me just how far she'd fallen since her little fantasy had exploded in her face. Against my better judgment. And let's be honest, most of my decisions regarding Lauren had been against my better judgment. I stepped back and opened the door wider. But I didn't open it all the way, and I didn't step aside to let her in. I kept the door between us like some kind of physical barrier, like I was protecting myself from whatever emotional manipulation she was about to unleash. "Thank you," she said, and the relief in her voice was so palpable that I almost felt bad for her. Almost. "Marcus, I know you probably think I'm here because I want something from you. Or because I'm trying to manipulate you into taking me back. But that's not. That's not the only reason. What's the other reason? I asked, and I was surprised by how steady my voice sounded. Inside, I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff during an earthquake, but somehow I managed to sound calm and controlled. She took a shaky breath and looked down at her hands, which were twisted together in front of her like she was trying to physically hold herself together. I need you to know how sorry I am, she said. Not because I want you to forgive me, and not because I think saying sorry will somehow fix everything I broke, but because you deserve to hear it. You deserve to know that I understand what I did to you. Do you? I asked, and there was more edge in my voice than I'd intended. Do you really understand what you did to me, Lauren? Because a few weeks ago, you were telling me to stop making myself look crazy. A few weeks ago, you were acting like I was the problem for noticing that my wife was cheating on me. Her face crumpled, and for a moment I thought she was going to start crying right there in the hallway. But she managed to hold it together, taking another one of those deep, shaky breaths that seemed to be her new default method of maintaining emotional control. I was trying to protect myself, she said quietly. I was trying to make myself feel less guilty about what I was doing by convincing myself that you were overreacting, that you were being paranoid and jealous and unreasonable. It was easier than admitting that you were right about everything. This was new territory. Lauren admitting she was wrong about something was like witnessing a solar eclipse, theoretically possible, but so rare that you kind of had to document it when it happened. I destroyed us, she continued, and her voice was getting stronger now, like she'd been practicing this speech and was finally hitting her stride. I destroyed us, and I destroyed Damien's marriage, and I hurt Elena, who never did anything wrong except marry a man who turned out to be just as selfish and cowardly as I am. I caused so much pain, Marcus, and for what? For some stupid fantasy about recapturing something from my past that was never real to begin with. She looked up at me then, and I could see tears starting to form in her eyes again. Damien isn't who I thought he was. Hell, he probably never was who I thought he was. I built up this whole romantic narrative in my head about our history together, about how he was the one who got away, about how maybe we were meant to be together. But the truth is, he's a coward who was looking for an excuse to cheat on his wife, and I was stupid enough to give him that excuse. What happened? I asked, because despite everything, I was curious about how their little love story had fallen apart so spectacularly. Lauren let out a bitter laugh that sounded nothing like the woman I'd been married to for 2 years. What happened is that reality set in. Elena found out. I still don't know how, but she found out. And suddenly Damien wasn't interested in romantic dinners and champagne toasts anymore. Suddenly it was all my fault. I seduced him, I manipulated him, I destroyed his marriage. He actually had the nerve to tell me that I should have known better, that I should have respected the fact that he was married. The irony was so thick you could practically see it hanging in the air between us. And what did you tell him? I told him to go fuck himself, she said. And for just a second, I saw a flash of the old Lauren, the one who didn't take shit from anyone and who could cut someone down with just her words. I told him that he was a grown man who made his own choices, and that if he didn't want to cheat on his wife, maybe he shouldn't have been sliding into my DMs telling me how much he missed me. He reached out to you first? I asked, because somehow this detail mattered, even though it didn't change anything about what had happened. She nodded. A few months ago, right around the time you said I started getting distant, he sent me this message about how he'd been thinking about me, about how he wondered what would have happened if we'd stayed together. And God, Marcus, I was so fucking stupid. I was feeling disconnected from you, from us, and I let him make me believe that maybe there was something better out there. She tried to reach for my hand then, the way she used to do when she wanted to emphasize a point or when she was asking for forgiveness for something minor, like forgetting to pick up milk at the grocery store. But this wasn't minor, and I wasn't ready for physical contact, so I pulled my hand back before she could touch it. The rejection hit her like a physical blow. I could see it in the way her face changed, the way her shoulders sagged, the way she seemed to shrink in on herself like I'd just confirmed her worst fears about how I felt about her. I don't expect you to forgive me, she said quickly, like she was afraid I was about to close the door in her face. I know what I did is unforgivable. I know I broke something that can't be fixed. But Marcus, I need you to know that losing you has been the worst thing that's ever happened to me. Worse than the guilt, worse than the shame, worse than having to face Elena's family at the grocery store, and see the way they look at me like I'm some kind of monster. You did this to yourself, I said, and the words came out harsher than I'd intended. You made these choices, Lauren. You packed that bag, you walked out that door, you posted those fucking Instagram stories. You did all of this, and now you want me to feel sorry for you because it didn't turn out the way you hoped. She flinched like I'd slapped her, but she didn't back down. You're right, she said. You're absolutely right. I did this to myself. I made every single choice that led us here, and I have to live with that for the rest of my life. But Marcus, I'm not here asking you to feel sorry for me. I'm here asking you to let me try to make some small part of this right. How? I asked. How could you possibly make any of this right? I don't know, she admitted, and the honesty in her voice was more devastating than any manipulation could have been. I don't know if I can make it right, but I want to try. I want to be the person you fell in love with again, even if it's too late for us. I want to figure out how to live with what I've done and still be someone who deserves to exist in the world. The conversation was getting too heavy, too real, and I could feel myself getting pulled back into caring about her pain when I'd worked so hard to build up walls against exactly that kind of emotional manipulation. Because that's what this was, wasn't it? Even if she didn't mean it consciously, even if she was being genuine about her regret and her pain, she was still trying to make me care about her again. I can't do this, I said, starting to close the door. I can't be your therapist, Lauren. I can't be the person who helps you figure out how to live with what you did to me. But she put her hand out to stop the door from closing, not aggressively, but desperately, like she was drowning and I was the only life preserver in sight. Please, she said, and there was that word again. I'm not asking you to fix me, Marcus. I'm not asking you to take care of me or help me or any of that. I'm just asking you not to give up on the idea that people can change, that I can change. I looked at her for a long moment, really looked at her, trying to see past the tears and the desperation to figure out if there was anything real underneath all the emotion. What I saw was someone who was genuinely broken, someone who had finally realized the full scope of what she destroyed and was trying to figure out how to live in a world where she was the villain in her own story. But I also saw someone who had made calculated, deliberate choices to hurt me, someone who had gaslighted me and tried to make me doubt my own reality, someone who had walked away from our marriage without a backward glance when she thought she had something better waiting for her. You already had your chance, I said finally, and my voice was steady and calm and final. You don't get another. The words hit her like a physical blow. She stepped back from the door, her hand dropping to her side, and for a moment, she just stood there staring at me like she couldn't quite believe what I'd said. Marcus, she started, but I shook my head. No, I said. You don't get to destroy everything and then come back when your backup plan falls apart. You don't get to walk back into my life just because you finally realized what you threw away. You made your choice, Lauren. Live with it. Something shifted in her face then, the desperate sadness giving way to anger, and suddenly I was looking at someone I recognized. This was the Lauren who had blamed me for embarrassing her when I'd called out her affair. This was the Lauren who had tried to make me feel crazy for noticing that my wife was cheating on me. Fine, she said, and her voice had gone cold and sharp in a way that was frighteningly familiar. Fine, Marcus. Be that way. Stay bitter and angry and alone. See how that works out for you. She turned and walked toward the stairwell, but then stopped and came back, and for a second I thought she was going to apologize for the outburst. Instead, she slammed her palm against the wall next to my door so hard that I could hear it echo down the hallway. This isn't over, she said, but the words sounded hollow, like even she didn't believe them. Then she turned and walked away, her footsteps echoing in the stairwell until I heard the door to the building slam shut behind her. I stood in my doorway for a long time after she left, staring at the empty hallway and trying to process what had just happened. Part of me felt vindicated. I'd stood my ground. I'd refused to be manipulated. I'd made it clear that there were consequences for destroying someone's life. But another part of me felt hollow, like I'd just witnessed the final death of something that had once been beautiful, even if it had turned out to be built on a foundation of lies. The echo of her palm hitting the wall seemed to hang in the air long after she'd left, and I realized it felt like the sound of a coffin closing. The final punctuation mark on a relationship that had been slowly dying for months before it finally collapsed under the weight of betrayal and broken promises. I closed the door and locked it, And for the first time since this whole nightmare had started, I felt like I could finally breathe again. You'd think that having a dramatic face-to-face confrontation with your cheating ex-wife would be the end of things, right? Like, surely after she slammed her hand against your wall and stormed off into the night, that would be the final chapter in the shit show that used to be your marriage. Well, if you thought that, then you clearly haven't dealt with someone who's used to getting what they want and refuses to accept that no is a complete sentence. Lauren went quiet for exactly 1 week after our hallway showdown. 7 blissful days of silence where I almost started to believe that maybe she'd finally gotten the message, that maybe she'd realized her dramatic gesture had fallen flat and decided to move on with whatever was left of her life. I should have known better. I should have remembered that Lauren never gave up on anything easily, especially when her ego was involved. The silence wasn't really silence, though. It was more like the eye of a hurricane. This deceptively calm period where you start to think maybe the storm is over, right before the back half hits you with twice the force of what came before. And sure enough, just when I was starting to relax, just when I was beginning to think I might actually be free from her emotional terrorism, my phone started buzzing again. But this time was different. This time, she wasn't just calling from her regular number. Oh no, that would have been too simple, too easy to ignore. Instead, she started calling from random numbers, her friends' phones, work phones, numbers I didn't recognize that would show up on my caller ID like little landmines designed to trick me into picking up. The first time it happened, I actually answered, thinking it was a legitimate call. Maybe a work emergency, maybe a family member, maybe literally anyone other than the woman who'd spent the last month making my life a living hell. Marcus, please don't hang up. Lauren's voice came through the speaker, and I felt that familiar punch to the gut that came with hearing her voice when I wasn't expecting it. I hung up immediately, but the damage was done. She'd found a way around my defenses, and we both knew it. The fake number calls became a regular occurrence. Sometimes it would be her crying, sometimes apologizing, sometimes angry, sometimes desperate. She'd cycle through every emotional state in the human experience, trying to find the magic combination that would somehow crack my resolve and make me pick up the phone on purpose instead of by accident. But the calls weren't the worst part. The worst part was the emails. Long, rambling messages that would show up in my inbox at all hours of the day and night, each one more desperate and unhinged than the last. She'd write about our first date, our wedding day, the vacation we took to Colorado where we got snowed in and spent 3 days playing board games in a cabin. She'd apologize for things she'd done years ago that I'd forgotten about, as if somehow cataloging every minor transgression from our relationship would add up to forgiveness for the major one that had destroyed everything. One email in particular stood out from the rest. It came on a Tuesday morning while I was getting ready for work, and the subject line simply read, "The truth. You were the only one who ever really cared about me." It began, and I almost deleted it right there without reading further. But something about those words, about the raw honesty of them, made me keep reading despite my better judgment. "I know that sounds like bullshit after everything I've done," she continued, "but it's true. Everyone else in my life has always wanted something from me, has always had some kind of agenda. My parents wanted me to be perfect, my friends wanted me to be fun, my coworkers wanted me to be professional, but you were the only person who just wanted me to be me." The email went on for pages, detailing every way she'd felt pressured by the world to be someone she wasn't, every moment she'd felt like she was performing instead of living. It was articulate and thoughtful and heartbreaking in all the ways that Lauren could be when she really wanted to get under your skin. The email went on for pages, detailing every way she'd felt pressured by the world to be someone she wasn't, every moment she'd felt like she was performing instead of living. It was articulate and thoughtful and heartbreaking in all the ways that Lauren could be when she really wanted to get under your skin. "I threw away the only real thing in my life because I was scared," she wrote. "I was scared that I wasn't good enough for you, that you'd eventually realize you could do better, so I sabotaged everything before you could leave me first." I know how fucked up that sounds, but it's the truth. The email ended with a plea that was so raw and desperate it made me physically uncomfortable to read. "Don't give up on me, Marcus. I know I don't deserve another chance, but I'm asking for one anyway. Because I can't imagine a world where you're not in my life, and I don't want to have to try." I deleted the email without responding, but I couldn't delete it from my memory. Those words, You were the only one who ever really cared about me. Kept echoing in my head for days afterward, like some kind of emotional earworm that I couldn't shake no matter how hard I tried. The thing was, I knew she was right. I had been the only person who'd cared about her without expecting anything in return, the only person who'd loved her for who she was instead of who she pretended to be. And maybe that was exactly the problem. Maybe I'd made it too easy for her to take me for granted, to assume I'd always be there no matter how badly she treated me. But knowing something intellectually and feeling it emotionally are two different things entirely, and emotionally, I was exhausted. Exhausted from the constant barrage of calls and emails and desperate attempts to get my attention. Exhausted from having to guard my heart against someone who'd once had unlimited access to it. Exhausted from grieving a relationship that refused to stay dead. That's when I made the decision that probably saved what was left of my sanity. I started throwing away her things. Not angrily, not dramatically, but methodically, like I was performing some kind of ritual cleansing. Her coffee mug with the chip on the handle that she'd refused to let me throw away because it was lucky. Her forgotten sweater that still smelled faintly of her perfume and had been hanging in my closet like some kind of ghost. The little trinkets she'd left scattered around the apartment. Hair ties on the bathroom counter. A bookmark in a novel she'd never finished reading. A tube of lip balm that had rolled under the couch cushions. Each item I threw away felt like removing a splinter from an infected wound. Painful in the moment, but ultimately necessary for healing. My apartment slowly transformed from our place to my place. And for the first time in months, it started to feel like home again instead of a museum dedicated to my failed marriage. The physical act of removing Lauren's presence from my living space had an unexpected psychological effect. With each bag of her belongings that went down the trash chute, I felt a little lighter, a little freer, a little more like myself again. The apartment finally stopped smelling like her perfume. The bed finally stopped feeling too big for just me. The silence finally stopped feeling oppressive and started feeling peaceful. For the first time since this whole nightmare began, I slept through the night without waking up in a cold sweat, without reaching across the bed for someone who wasn't there, without lying awake replaying every moment of our relationship and trying to figure out where it had all gone wrong. The ghost of what we used to be was finally starting to fade, and I was finally starting to remember what it felt like to be just me instead of half of a couple that no longer existed. You know what's funny about closure? Everyone talks about it like it's this magical moment when all your pain disappears and you suddenly feel whole again. Like some kind of emotional fairy godmother waves her wand and transforms all your hurt into wisdom and inner peace. But real closure isn't a moment. It's a process. It's the slow, gradual realization that you can think about what happened without feeling like someone's driving nails into your chest. It's waking up one morning and realizing you didn't check your phone first thing to see if your ex-wife had found another way to contact you. It's the quiet satisfaction of knowing that you're no longer the fool in someone else's story. Lauren kept her word, which honestly surprised the hell out of me. After weeks of desperate voicemails and fake phone numbers and increasingly unhinged messages about how we were meant to be together, the silence that followed her final apology felt almost surreal. No more late-night texts. No more emails from random accounts. No more social media messages from profiles with names like Sarah Johnson 2847 that were obviously her in digital disguise. Just blessed, beautiful silence. But even in that silence, she managed to get in one last shot. 3 weeks after her promise to leave me alone, I came home from work to find an envelope slipped under my door. No postmark, no return address. Just my name written in Lauren's distinctive handwriting across cream-colored paper that probably cost more per sheet than most people spend on lunch. I stared at that envelope for a solid 10 minutes before I finally worked up the courage to open it. Part of me wanted to throw it away without reading whatever final manipulation she'd crafted. Part of me was morbidly curious to see what she thought would be the perfect closing argument for why I should take her back. And a small, pathetic part of me was still hoping that maybe, just maybe, there would be something in there that would make sense of the senseless destruction of everything we'd built together. The note was short, written in the same careful script I remembered from birthday cards and grocery lists, and the thousands of little notes we'd left each other during our years together. I'm sorry. I hope you find someone better. That was it. No lengthy explanations, no final desperate pleas, No attempts to justify or minimize what she'd done. Just 7 words that somehow managed to be both an apology and an acknowledgement that what we'd had was truly over. I read those words probably a dozen times, looking for hidden meanings or manipulation tactics or some last-ditch effort to worm her way back into my life. But there was nothing. Just a simple, honest admission that she'd fucked up and that I deserved better than what she'd given me. I tossed the note in the trash without reading it twice, and you know what? It felt good. Not triumphant, not vindictive, just good. Like I was finally closing a book that I'd been carrying around for too long, letting the weight of it go so I could pick up something new. Rachel called me the next day, because somehow my sister always has supernatural timing when it comes to checking in on my emotional state. "You sound different," she said after we'd been talking for about 10 minutes about nothing in particular. "Lighter, maybe? Less like you're waiting for the other shoe to drop." And she was right. I did feel lighter. For the first time in months, I wasn't walking around with this constant low-level anxiety about what Lauren might do next, what boundaries she might try to cross, what emotional landmine she might detonate in my carefully reconstructed life. The silence wasn't just an absence of her voice. It was the presence of peace. "I'm proud of you," Rachel said, and there was something in her tone that made me stop whatever I was doing and really listen. "I know this whole thing has been hell, but you handled it exactly right. You didn't take her back when it would have been easier. You didn't let her make you crazy. You didn't compromise who you are just to avoid being alone." Noah echoed the same sentiment when we grabbed beers that weekend. "Dude, you deserve better," he said, raising his bottle in what I realized was a toast to my newfound freedom. "You always deserved better than someone who would throw away 4 years for a 2-week fantasy with her married ex-boyfriend." Even my mom, who had always liked Lauren and had been diplomatically neutral throughout most of the divorce proceedings, finally weighed in with her characteristic bluntness. "You finally look lighter, Marcus. Like you're not carrying around someone else's problems anymore." And it was true. I did feel lighter. Not happy, exactly. I wasn't ready for that yet. But I felt like I could breathe fully for the first time in months. I felt like I could make plans for my future without wondering if Lauren was going to show up and try to derail them. I felt like I could trust my own judgment again after months of being gaslighted into thinking I was paranoid and unreasonable. Most importantly, I felt like I wasn't the fool anymore. For so long, I've been the guy who didn't see it coming, the husband who was too trusting and naive to recognize that his wife was planning her exit strategy. I'd been the punchline in Lauren's story about finding herself and discovering what freedom felt like. But now I was the guy who had figured it out. I was the guy who had called her on her bullshit and refused to let her rewrite history. I was the guy who had set boundaries and stuck to them, even when she tried every manipulation tactic in the book to make me cave. If Lauren had wanted freedom, well, she got it. She got the freedom to live with the consequences of her choices. She got the freedom to explain to future partners why her last relationship ended with her cheating on her husband with a married man. She got the freedom to deal with the reputation she'd earned in our social circle as someone who couldn't be trusted around other people's husbands. As for me, I finally remembered what peace feels like. Not the fake peace that comes from avoiding conflict or pretending problems don't exist, but real peace. The kind that comes from knowing you've acted with integrity even when it would have been easier to compromise. The kind that comes from refusing to accept treatment you don't deserve, even when you're lonely and hurt, and part of you just wants the pain to stop. I started sleeping through the night again. I started making plans that extended beyond just getting through the day. I started thinking about what I wanted my life to look like now that I wasn't spending all my energy trying to save a marriage that had been doomed from the moment Lauren decided that her happiness was more important than our vows. And you know what? For the first time in months, the future didn't feel like something to be endured. It felt like something to be lived. Lauren had played her game, and she'd gotten exactly what she'd asked for. But I hadn't played the role she'd expected me to play. I hadn't been the broken man who begged her to come back. I hadn't been the bitter ex-husband who spent years plotting revenge. I hadn't been the fool who let her walk all over him and then thanked her for the privilege. I'd been something she probably hadn't counted on, a man who knew his own worth and refused to settle for anything less than he deserved. And as I sat in my apartment, finally and completely mine, I realized that was exactly who I wanted to be.